I'll never forget the moment my misconception about Japan shattered into 1,000 pieces. I had arrived at Tokyo Station during evening rush hour, expecting chaos and struggle, the kind you see in countries fighting to keep up with the modern world. Instead, I stood frozen in the middle of the Grand Concourse, watching something that seemed impossible. Thousands of commuters moved like a perfectly choreographed dance. Not a single person bumping into another, not a raised voice, not a piece of trash on the gleaming floors. The station itself looked like a luxury hotel, with soaring ceilings, immaculate marble, and shops selling perfectly arranged bento boxes that looked too beautiful to eat. This wasn't poverty. This was something else entirely. Growing up, I had somehow absorbed this idea that Japan was struggling economically, stuck in those lost decades. Everyone talked about a nation that had peaked in the 1980s and never recovered. The media loved showing tiny apartments, people sleeping in capsule hotels, salarymen looking exhausted on trains. I had pictured a country barely getting by, its best days behind it. But standing in that station, holding a bottle of cold tea I bought from a vending machine that actually worked perfectly and gave me exact change, I realized I'd been spectacularly wrong. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying, and over the next 2 weeks, Japan would completely rewire my understanding of what wealth actually means. The first revelation came when I noticed the public infrastructure. The toilets in a random subway station had heated seats, automatic lids, and a control panel with more buttons than my rental car back home. They played music to mass embarrassing sounds. They were spotlessly clean, stocked with paper, and completely free to use. I started paying attention to everything around me with new eyes. The sidewalks had tactile paving for blind pedestrians everywhere, not just in fancy districts. Traffic lights made different sounds at each intersection, so visually impaired people could identify their location. Earthquake-resistant buildings stood like silent guardians, their sophisticated engineering invisible but omnipresent. This level of investment in public welfare wasn't the hallmark of a poor nation. It was a signature of society that had achieved something most wealthy countries still struggle with: actual quality of life for everyone. Then I rode the Shinkansen from Tokyo to Kyoto, and whatever remained of my poor Japan delusion evaporated completely. The bullet train departed at exactly 2:33 p.m. Not 2:34, not 2:32. It would arrive in Kyoto at exactly 5:06 p.m., covering 476 kilometers in 2.5 hours. The seats were spacious and clean, with tray tables that didn't wobble, power outlets that actually worked, and legroom that made me forget I was on public transportation. Through the window, I watched the countryside blur past, and I saw something remarkable. Even the small towns looked prosperous. Houses had solar panels. Roads were perfectly maintained. Rice fields were precisely cultivated with modern equipment. There were no potholes, no crumbling buildings, no visible signs of neglect anywhere. Japan had built a transportation system so advanced that other countries study it like a blueprint for the future, and they made it affordable enough that ordinary people use it every single day. The economic statistics I looked up later that night in my hotel room told a story my eyes had already confirmed. Japan is the world's fourth largest economy, with a GDP exceeding $5 trillion. It's home to more Fortune 500 companies than any country except the United States and China. Toyota, Sony, Nintendo, SoftBank, Uniqlo, Muji, Panasonic. These aren't struggling brands, they're global powerhouses. Japanese companies pioneered everything from hybrid cars to portable gaming, from instant ramen to the QR code. The country holds more patents per capita than almost anywhere on Earth. This is a nation that invented the future in countless industries. Yet somehow the narrative persisted that Japan was economically stagnant or declining. The reality is that Japan isn't poor. It's strategically focused on quality over flashiness, on collective prosperity over individual ostentation. What really opened my eyes was understanding Japanese wealth culture. In Ginza, one of Tokyo's most expensive districts, I watched business people in understated clothing browse shops where a single piece of fruit could cost $50. These weren't displays of desperation. They were expressions of a culture that values perfection and craftsmanship over brand logos and obvious luxury. A Japanese person might live in a compact apartment not because they're poor, but because urban land is scarce and they prioritize location, efficiency, and community. They might take the train instead of driving, not because they can't afford a car, but because the train system is superior in every measurable way. They might eat at a tiny ramen shop with only 8 seats, not because fancy restaurants don't exist, but because that ramen master has spent 30 years perfecting a single bowl, and that's worth more than any Michelin star. I visited Depachika, a department store basement food hall, in Osaka, and it was like stepping into an edible art gallery. Vendors sold Wagyu beef so marbled it looked like artwork, strawberries individually wrapped and cushioned like jewels, perfectly uniform melons that cost more than my flight to Japan. Every item was presented with such care, such attention to detail, that shopping became an aesthetic experience. The staff wrapped purchases with origami-level precision, making even a simple purchase feel ceremonial. This wasn't behavior of an economically desperate society. This was a culture that transcended mere wealth and achieved something closer to refinement. The Japanese had taken prosperity and asked, what comes next? The answer was craftsmanship, excellence, and beauty in every detail of daily life.
The technology gap became impossible to ignore. In convenience stores, humble 7-Elevens, and family marts on every corner, I could pay utility bills, ship packages internationally, buy concert tickets, withdraw money from any bank, print documents, and get genuinely delicious fresh food at 3 in the morning. The stores were so clean, so well organized, so thoughtfully stocked that they made American convenience stores look like remnants from another century. In restaurants, tablets let me order in multiple languages. Robots delivered dishes to tables, and payment systems worked with a tap of my phone. Meanwhile, my credit cards from back home often didn't work because Japan had moved beyond magnetic strips to chip and pin technology years ago. The irony hit me hard. I had come from a country that considered itself technologically advanced, yet I couldn't use half my devices because Japan's infrastructure was too sophisticated for my outdated equipment. The social safety net told another story about Japan's wealth. Healthcare is universal and affordable. A doctor's visit might cost $20 with insurance that everyone has. Life expectancy is among the world's highest at around 84 years. Crime is so low that children ride trains alone to school, and people leave their bicycles unlocked outside shops. The streets are safe at any hour, in any neighborhood, in any city. Homelessness exists, but at rates dramatically lower than most wealthy nations, and the country continually works on support systems to address even that. Japan had answered a question that most rich countries still fumble. How do you create a society where wealth translates into actual security, health, and peace of mind for the majority of citizens? They actually did it. I started noticing the small things that revealed deep prosperity. Public parks were immaculately maintained with volunteers, keeping them pristine. Libraries were architectural marvels filled with engaged readers, not afterthoughts. Schools were clean, well-equipped, and safe, with hot lunch programs that taught children nutrition and food culture. Even in rural areas, community centers offered classes, activities, and gathering spaces that fostered social connection. Japan had invested its wealth not in gaudy monuments or billionaire vanity projects, but in the everyday infrastructure of a functioning, harmonious society. The wealth was there. You just had to know how to see it. It was in the reliability of services, the cleanliness of spaces, the functionality of systems, the longevity of people, the safety of streets.
The food scene demolished any remaining doubts. Tokyo has more Michelin stars than Paris. But beyond the fancy restaurants, even casual eateries served food that would be considered upscale elsewhere. A random neighborhood udon shop served handmade noodles and broth that had simmered for hours, topped with tempura fried to order, all for less than $10. Conveyor belt sushi restaurants used tablet ordering systems and delivered your choices on miniature trains, combining technology with tradition in the most delightful way possible. Standing bars serve perfect yakitori, each skewer carefully grilled, thoughtfully seasoned, impossibly delicious. The Japanese hadn't just gotten rich and started eating expensively. They had elevated everyday food to an art form accessible to everyone. That's what sophisticated wealth looks like, when excellence becomes ordinary. I finally understood what had confused me. Japan's wealth doesn't scream. It doesn't wear designer logos or drive gold-plated cars or build the tallest buildings just for bragging rights. Japanese prosperity is quiet, functional, and deeply embedded in daily life. It shows up in trains that run on time, in products that last decades, in public spaces that feel human-scaled and welcoming, in craftsmanship that treats every task as worthy of excellence. While other wealthy nations measure success in GDP growth and stock markets, Japan measures it in quality of life, longevity, safety, and collective well-being. They had cracked a code that eludes most rich countries: how to make wealth actually improve people's lives rather than just accumulate in bank accounts and real estate portfolios. The poor Japan myth persists because we've been trained to recognize only certain expressions of wealth. The flashy, the big, the obvious. We see small apartments and think poverty, when we should see efficient urban planning and community-focused design. We hear about economic stagnation and think decline, when we should see a mature economy that prioritizes stability and quality over endless growth. We notice the modest fashion and think struggle, when we should see a culture that values substance over status symbols. Japan isn't poor, and it never was. It's simply wealthy in ways that challenge our assumptions about what prosperity should look like. Standing in Kyoto's Fushimi Inari Shrine at sunset, watching thousands of vermilion torii gates march up the mountain, maintained perfectly for generations, I realized Japan had been teaching me all along. Real wealth isn't about having more. It's about making what you have meaningful, beautiful, and built to last. This is a new channel, and honestly, I'm still processing everything I learned in Japan. Every video I create is an attempt to share these revelations, to help others see what I almost missed because of my preconceptions. If you found this perspective valuable, if it changed how you think about Japan or wealth or what truly matters in society, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. Your support directly enables me to keep traveling through Japan, uncovering these stories, and sharing the aspects of Japanese culture that deserve to be celebrated and understood. Leave a comment telling me what surprised you most, or share your own experiences if you've been to Japan. Let's build a community of people who appreciate depth over flash, who recognize that the most profound forms of wealth are often the quietest. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next journey through Japan.